folks, to another episode of Teach MA Dude, where we will break down some important ideas related to teaching in Mass, coming straight at you from a real Massachusetts teacher. All right, really excited to be taking you through today's content. So today we're going to be talking about this idea of the unions, this idea that these teachers' unions are so powerful that we can't accomplish X or Y because of these strong, powerful teachers' unions. And what are we going to do to stop these powerful teachers' unions? All right. You hear this a lot, particularly in more kind of conservative leaning news.
The national teachers unions failed our kids.
This is just another example of the unions putting politics ahead of what is in the best interest of children. They are using this moment right now to try to fulfill a liberal wish list.
It's appalling that she has the gall to pretend like she wasn't the one demanding and working hand in glove with the CDC to keep schools closed.
And to be honest with you, I think there's definitely a lot more to unpack than is made out to be from what you hear, as is the case with so many issues. So what I thought I'd do is I thought I'd kind of unpack a few things here in this video. So the first thing I think I really need to dive into is from a Massachusetts teacher perspective, at least working in a public school environment, because if you work in a charter school, you're not guaranteed to be protected by a union unless you work in an in-district or Horace Mann charter school, as of the time this video was made. If you work in the other model, which is Commonwealth, you're not guaranteed union protection. And of course, if you work in a private, or sometimes they're referred to as independent school, or similar type of school to that, you're also not guaranteed union protection. So that being said, how do those work? And then I'm going to kind of get into kind of my experience being a union, and this comes from being not just a member of a union, but also an officer in a union. It comes from not just being part of a union of K through 12 teachers, but also of college teachers. And so a couple varied experiences there. And then I'll kind of get into my whole philosophy of like what is going on and kind of what is my stance in the bigger picture. So I guess the place to start is, as a public school teacher, what can you really expect? And basically, what does that mean? So when you join up with your first public school teaching job, all right, you're going to be assigned to be part of 3 unions generally. You're going to have the National Teachers Union, which is the National Education Association. You're going to have the state level union, which is the Massachusetts Teachers Association. And then you're going to have your local teachers association. So that's going to be named based on where you live. If you live in Boston, that's the Boston Teachers Union, for example. All right. As part of being in those organizations, you are going to be paying dues. And the majority of your dues typically go to your local organization. And that's the one that you're going to see, that you're going to work most closely with. It tends to be the case, in my experience, that you very, very rarely see anyone from your state union. Of course, if you work in more of an officer capacity, you may be able to see them a little bit more often. Technically speaking, you will find that if you are in Massachusetts, that more or less your local union is a division of the Massachusetts Teachers Association. So you might want to look for that when you look at your documents, your official union documents. And you will also find that, interestingly, the Mass Teachers Association will host on their website all of the union collective bargaining agreements, or we might also say contracts. So that is more or less your breakdown of your 3 levels of unions, just to kind of give you the sense of how that particularly works. Now, the next question people are going to ask would be, what is it like to be in a union in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts? And I can tell you from a membership perspective, and again, this can be a college, this could be a high school. is there really is no answer to that question. It really depends. And I think that's largely because the Massachusetts Teachers Association doesn't really have the organizational capacity to be able to have a set of best standards that they can actually hold everyone to. So, for example, you could have one union in one town that is supposedly a subdivision of the Massachusetts Teachers Association where you're operating in secrecy. Your union almost never is communicating with the members. You know, you hold your obligatory, annual meeting because you're required to hold an annual meeting. But that's really the majority of the way. You got your blast emails once, you do it, but it's again, people are struggling to get information. People don't know who their reps are. And then in a district within an hour's drive from there, you could have another one where you have holiday parties, you have appreciation events, you have, monthly outreach from the union, you have, people stepping up, people having competitive races to actually want to step up, want to be a part. So that's the thing. There's just so much variance. And I think it's really awesome when you have unions at the local level that have that level of involvement. That is, I think, kind of like what the spirit of a union is a mechanism through which the employees can have some advocacy when issues arise with management, as they, inevitably will. And conflicts can be okay, and conflict, I would argue, is necessary. But I think the issue is today, and I don't think we're doing this well enough, is how do we actually resolve that conflict? So, there's just so much variance that you're going to see if you're a member of the union. And what you want to do is you want to hope for the best. One thing you can do as a teacher is, especially in the stage where you're actually going out and applying for jobs and looking for positions, is why don't you check that local union? Do they have a website? What do they post on their website? How involved are they in the community? How involved are they in terms of what do they bring to teachers? Do they have grants for classrooms to help teachers get supplies? What resources do they offer maybe teachers who are, encountering, some of the inevitable issues that we encounter in our lives, with our families, with our health, etc. What are they doing to actually advocate for the teachers? How are they putting your dues to work? I think the local is just so incredibly important in that regard. Now, I would just keep that in mind that when you look at the state level, that is unfortunately where I think that and again, remember this is a video about my personal opinion, is where I do not so much agree. Now, if you had the opportunity to take a look recently, we are having a first governor. This is amazing. We have our first LGBTQ governor. Amazing. We have our first female elected governor. Amazing. And, she ran on a very ambitious agenda, which includes education, making it better, whatever that even means. And she's already appointed the first, I believe the first gentleman of color to ever lead the Department of Education, which I think is great in a state that tends to not have the best outcomes for students of color as compared to white students. I think it's something that is an unfortunate reality, but one that we got to own until it's no longer a reality. But that being said, I think the issue is it's worth noting that when this person, Maura Healey, forms her transition team, and she forms a major pillar of that transition team around education. Listen, you're not going to get an argument from me, but where do we see the president of the teachers union? The small text. He's not leading the, they go out of their way, the MTA, to say, oh, we're taking this big role in the transition. Where are you guys? Listen, the president showed up. He's one of a bajillion names. He's not co-chairing this committee. And you know who is? A superintendent. It doesn't really look good that the union is a small name. Now, yes, is it alphabetically listed and that's why they're way down there, the head of the union? Sure. But there's so many people getting involved. And again, stakeholders are good. You got to wonder, how much airtime are the teachers getting in something that's so impactful in teachers' everyday lives, right? And you have to remember that the MTA represents teachers in colleges and high schools, and not just teachers. They could also represent education professionals in general. So they could even represent paraprofessionals, educational support professionals, extremely important. So there's a lot going on under the hood. And unfortunately, the MTA has made the calculation that the best way that it will go about handling its platform is to, unfortunately, push a lot of what I consider to be a little bit socialist propaganda, in a sense. So my concern with MTA is that they're pushing this, we need to ensure that everyone has a $15 minimum wage, and et cetera, et cetera. And, no one should have to work 40 hours and not be able to put food on their table. And I'm not saying that I disagree with either of those statements. What my question is that why is this the message of the teachers union? Is it the case that there are many teachers who are not making $15 an hour? Can you show me teachers who are making under $30,000 a year? I'm waiting. I don't know. I'm interested to know about this. Can you tell me how many teachers in Massachusetts? Now, this is an issue that Massachusetts teachers don't. Some of them do have to work second jobs, and that is a concern. However, that being said, it feels like they're pushing for things that might be beneficial to everyone, when at the same time, let's look at some issues in Massachusetts. Student behavior is out of control. Standards are falling with regard to what are we asking students to do to obtain a high school diploma. What are we asking students to do on a day-to-day basis? What are behavioral expectations looking like? This is both these issues are much bigger issues. What are working conditions like? Why are teachers in Boston having hot water thrown on their face by students? If you've seen the Henderson Inclusion School, and administrators aren't taking steps to ensure that teachers can go into their job and feel that they can do their job without being viciously assaulted by their students. Name me how many jobs do people have to worry about being viciously assaulted by their people that they work with, and then when they complain, being told.
This is just another example of the unions putting politics ahead of what is in the best interest of children.
So, but unfortunately, they're too busy with this $15 an hour nonsense, and unfortunately, they force the people under them because, again, the locals are basically subdivisions of the state union to toe the line and to essentially follow that nonsense. I think, again, what the locals do with that is their own thing. And so I think the locals mostly take that element of it and go, okay, we're just going to focus on what we need to do for our teachers. But again, you got to wonder, why are we giving all this money to that? And this is, again, if you work at a state college or you work at a K through 12 public school, you're putting money to the MTA. Now, if we think about where is the biggest source of money gone, The charter school, they spent millions of dollars to stop charter schools from expanding. Not that I disagree with that, but that is where a considerable amount of MTA money. I will tell you for a fact, a 100% fact, at no point in time was I or any member that I'm aware of consulted about should millions of dollars be spent for these ads. Never. They never said we want to take a poll and we, based on this poll of the membership who's paying, will make a determination. Never. And that was also the case for the most recent spending on the constitutional amendment. Last I checked, I hadn't seen how much money was spent, but I would imagine millions of dollars were spent to get that question passed. Now, do I think, again, charter schools being pared back and not being expanding is a good thing? Yes. I mean, unfortunately, it's right answer, wrong reason. I think that, unfortunately, as we've seen, Boston Globe has done a good job. One of the good things they've done a good job with is calling to light how families of color are taking their children out of Boston public schools, moving them in to charter schools, and that is maybe potentially contributing to the resegregation of Boston public schools. If that's true, that's not good. And so I think that is I think, again, if you want to argue that there's many arguments, okay? But in any case, it's also gotten funding into schools, which I think can be good. But the problem is that, you know, at the worst times for teachers, where have they been, right? When I was in a position where state schools were laying off teachers, adjuncts, because they needed to potentially tighten belts due to the COVID-19 crisis. Where was MTA? Okay, where was MTA? I challenge folks who are in a position of being a adjunct faculty member at a state school. That could be a community college. That could be a university in Massachusetts. How long did it take the MTA to jump in and say, oh, yeah, maybe we should start advocating for you? They held a meeting that the head of UMass did not even show up to. We had to look at a blank and empty seat while we were sitting wondering, will we have income for the work that we do to keep the university running? That's how much respect that the MTA was able to get. So, this brings us full circle. People, as you've seen, have said the unions are so powerful. Are the unions that powerful? And do the unions care? And are the unions a great investment? And really, I think the COVID-19 pandemic really sums it up. I think you can look at people and evaluate people based on what they did when they really needed to jump into action. Okay? And no time do we need to jump into action more than the COVID-19 pandemic. You know, I just mentioned one example of how I felt that the union really set back teachers at the college level. But unfortunately, during the COVID-19 pandemic, like, if you think about it, any time that things actually needed to happen, once the state sets mandates, the mandates are the mandates. Throughout the COVID-19 crisis, you don't believe me, look it up. Jeff Riley pulled at DESE, Department of Elementary and Secondary, pulled all kinds of nonsense throughout that COVID-19 pandemic. Throughout that time, who was most closely involved with those conversations with Jeff Riley? The Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents. Those superintendents have always been involved, closest with those making the close decisions. I didn't see many teachers as part of those conversations. Maybe at the beginning of the year where they were able to get us 10 more days to help get prepared. But throughout the year, you know, when superintendents ran across an issue that couldn't be solved, just when you thought that issue couldn't be resolved, Mr. Jeff Riley comes riding on in, makes a mandate, and then what can the unions do but try to have it make the smallest possible impact, aka impact bargaining, on the people they represent. So there's that issue. The other issue is, let's look at the elephant in the room. In Massachusetts, it is against the law. It is illegal for teachers to go on strike. That is fundamentally in the Massachusetts laws. So it does not matter what the reason. You could have literally crumbling walls. You could have toilet water in your classroom. You could have kids throwing food, throwing school supplies. You could have them throwing the desks around. You could have administration who tells you it's your problem that they're doing this. You need to make better. All this. Nothing that anyone can do could ever be a valid reason to walk out, to engage in a shortage, a stoppage, a slowdown, or a walkout. Cannot do it, cannot strike, no matter what. And if you attempt to, or you even suggest that you will, your union can be fined. Just for even a suggestion, you can be brought and told and forced to return to work. It's happened many, many times in Massachusetts, increasingly more often. And if you think about it, and here's the thing, it doesn't matter why. So that means you will go before a judge or whoever you're going to go in front of, and they will immediately find that you are wrong. You are not even allowed to state a case. You could lay out all that information. You are not even allowed to state a case. So think about that. We talk about due process. Where's the due process there? So if you really want to make the argument that they have these powerful teachers unions, you can go ahead and do that. Are they powerful in terms of the money that they throw around for certain issues that I don't particularly agree with necessarily, fully? Sure, I think they are powerful in terms of money they spend. But are they ultimately powerful in the grand scheme in doing anything that would be having a major impact? I would say at a national level, no, they're not. At a state level, no. They are also, as it currently exists, not. I think that the state level and the national level are only valuable to the extent that they form a network to help organize at the national level between states and at the state level between the locals, that have that organizational structure. Beyond that, there doesn't really seem to feel like they're serving. I'm not saying they're not useful, but I'm saying they don't feel like they're serving any valuable purpose to me. I mean, other than do you like the life insurance discounts? Do you like the mail that you get all the time offering you like coupons and stuff for being a teacher? I mean, if that's valuable to you, go ahead. I think the locals are the ones that have the biggest connection and the ones I personally value the most. And I think that they have the potential to do a lot, but again, because there's no overarching actual structure, they're left to be only as good as what you make of them. They'll all bargain you a contract. You're always welcome to look at and should look at that contract before you ever accept a position anywhere. And, they're welcome to do what they really want. But that's that really. So here's the thing. I hope you found this video to be helpful. This is kind of my unfiltered take on how do I feel about the unions? How do I feel about people saying we have these powerful unions? And kind of just like my take on them based in fact and based on what I've seen as a teacher in Massachusetts. Thanks for listening and have a great rest of your day.